Welcome to the Analytic Christian. I'm Jordan, and this is the channel where we explore topics in Christian philosophy and theology. Tonight, I'm joined by two guests. On the right, Dr. Liz Jackson. Hey, Liz.
Hey, how's it going?
And in the middle, Justin Mooney.
Hello.
Hey, Justin. And this is going to be a little bit of a change up. The big question we're asking is, should you go to grad school to be a professional philosopher? And both of these individuals here have gone through the process. Justin's finishing the process very, very soon. He's at the end, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So let's try to glean from their wisdom, and I hope that it is informative for you. All right, so I'm going to basically turn it over to you all. We've got some slides that they've prepared to walk us through some of the big questions. So I will mention this before we begin. Two things. One is I am announcing the winner of the book giveaway. I'm going to announce one winner about halfway through this interview, and then I'm going to announce the other winner at the end. There'll be two winners. So I want to say that. And I think that's it. Okay. So let's go ahead and jump in. First up, we've got Liz, and I'll mention this for people. In the bottom corner, whenever you see a basketball, that's Liz's time to talk because she's a hardcore basketball player.
Yeah, we'll see what Justin's is. Maybe people can guess in the chat what Justin's symbol might be.
Yes, if you have a guess for Justin's
put it in the chat. Okay, so thanks, Jordan. We're gonna start with the question, should I major in philosophy? Which is a question that some of your viewers might have considered as they're picking what they want to study in college. And I think our answer to this question might be slightly more optimistic than some things that we'll say later. And I actually think that there's some really good reasons to major in philosophy as like your undergrad for like your associate's or bachelor's degree. I think if you enjoy studying philosophy and you want to learn more about it, kind of depending on your future plans, I think it could actually be a great idea to major in philosophy. And that's even true if you don't plan to go to grad school in philosophy. So I do think there are some careers like if you want to be a nurse or an engineer or, these things where you kind of have to have a specific major in order to do them. Those people maybe should not be majoring in philosophy. You should major in like the degree that you would need for your career. But I think for a lot of other jobs, they really just kind of want you to have a degree and they don't always care exactly what it's in. And I think if you're looking at something like that, like maybe in business or there's a number of careers like this. There's some really interesting evidence that philosophy majors actually do really well in terms of salary over time. So when you look at not necessarily the salary that people get right out of college, but the salary that people have, 10 to 20 years down the line, philosophy majors are actually paid the best compared to many, many other kinds of majors. And at least one speculative potential reason for this is philosophy teaches you sort of logic, critical thinking, and problem solving. And I think this helps you with almost any job. Makes you a good writer, it makes you a good speaker, you can think and reason well and solve problems. So I think philosophy, it can teach you to do things that are important for a number of jobs. And not only that, but let's say you're thinking about grad school, but not necessarily in philosophy. So you're thinking about med school or law school. I actually would also encourage this kind of person to strongly consider philosophy, majoring in philosophy as well. For one, philosophy majors do very well on the GRE and LSAT. I know a ton of my friends from law school that actually majored in philosophy. And I've also heard people say, don't worry about taking an LSAT prep course. Just take like a intro to logic philosophy class. And so it's really, I think philosophy helps with a lot of the skills you need to be a lawyer. And also there's a lot of people that will, maybe take some bioethics classes and then go to med school after being a philosophy major. And I actually remember where I majored in philosophy at K-State, I think they had pre-law, pre-med, and they also had a pre-ministry track. So where you would take philosophy of religion, maybe like, I don't remember if we had like philosophical theology courses, but if your school offered that. And I think it's a really good prep to just like talk to people about God. And I actually did do ministry for a year in between grad school and undergrad. And I remember like all the students that had doubts and questions, they were like, send them to Liz. But it was cool because I was able to actually use my philosophical training to talk these students through like questions about the problem of evil, or they would be like, I'm like this biology major, and like, what do I say about evolution in the Bible? And like philosophy really helps you think through these things. So I found that very helpful when I was in ministry. And then the final bonus is just philosophy is interesting. It's a really fun major. You get to spend your classes thinking about God and free will and moral dilemmas and just kind of these fun puzzles. So I personally not only think philosophy is very useful, but it's also enjoyable. And I think if you like philosophy already, it's good to do a major of classes that you'll have fun with and enjoy. So should I major in philosophy? Depending on your circumstance, I think it could be a very good idea.
All right. I want to say that Isaiah, I think, and Taylor guessed Justin's symbol correctly. Every slide with a hippo in the bottom corner is Justin's slide. And notice Justin is representing tonight. He's got, you want to introduce your hippos there, Justin?
Oh yeah. So this is Homer. He's a cardboard cutout of a hippo, approximately life-sized. And I also have this hippo shirt that I got for Christmas. This particular hippo doesn't have a name though, so I don't know.
I should have worn my philosophy basketball shirt. This is a huge life regret. I actually have a shirt with Plato and Aristotle on it, and then I forget which one is like spinning a basketball on his finger. So.
Right? Yeah. I think I've seen that image before.
Yeah, I have that as a shirt. It's like in the other room, but
it would probably be Plato the one spinning, right? Because he's pointing up to the forms.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Good memory.
Into the immanent universals. That's how somebody explained the image to me once. I don't know if that's true.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think you're right though.
Okay. That was an aside. Okay. So I completely agree with everything Liz just said. I think for a lot of people, it's a great idea to major in philosophy in undergrad. It's completely the opposite with doing graduate work in philosophy. The sort of simple answer to the question, should you go to grad school for philosophy, is no, you shouldn't. All right, now here's a slightly more nuanced and longer version of that answer. The vast majority of people watching this live stream, and maybe all of them, but at least the vast majority of them, should almost certainly not go to grad school for philosophy. And the main reason for this is just that the job market for professional philosophers is really, really bad. So I am going to be going on the job market this coming fall. And what I've been told to expect is something like this. I will apply to about 100 jobs, and I will get lucky if I get maybe a couple of interviews, and I'll get extremely lucky if I get any offers. And it's not unlikely that I'll have to do the same thing again the following year. I just had a friend who, he's been on the job market for the past 3 years. He applied to about 100 jobs each of those 3 years, got a small handful of interviews in total over the 3 years, and just recently accepted a job as a history teacher at a high school. So he didn't end up getting an academic job, and his story is not an unusual one. The job market is just really, really bad. And that was true before the pandemic hit. And now, because of the pandemic, it's even worse because, schools just don't have the funding to hire people at this point. So that's really the main reason why you should not pursue graduate work in philosophy. A couple of ways of thinking about this that I've heard that I think are helpful is, you should pursue graduate work in philosophy only if you would do it for the sake of the graduate work itself. You would want to spend 5 to 7 years as a graduate student doing philosophy, even if you didn't end up getting a job as a philosophy professor afterward and you ended up having to do something completely different. If that sounds good to you, then yeah, okay, maybe it's worth trying to apply to grad school in philosophy. But if that option doesn't sound as good to you as just not even going to grad school in the first place, then you shouldn't go to grad school in the first place, for philosophy at any rate. Another way I've heard people talk about this that I think is somewhat helpful is if you could imagine yourself being happy doing almost anything else, then you should do that, because the job prospects are just that bad. So maybe you think, oh, I would love to be a philosophy professor, but I would also love to be, I don't know, a lawyer or a doctor or something. Then you should be one of the other things. That's one way I've heard people recommend that you think about this decision. And I think that that's good too. Okay, now
that he's crushed all your dreams, let's go to the second bullet point.
Yes, right. So there are some exceptions. I mean, obviously there are some jobs and, there are some openings in graduate programs for students and so forth, right? So if you are one of those people who, for some reason, this job market thing is not a decisive reason for you not to go to grad school, there are some other things to take into account that it's just like smart to consider when you're deciding what to do. One of this is that, grad school is difficult. There's a lot of work that's involved. You're most likely going to be playing the role of a kind of a student and a teacher at the same time for most of your graduate school experience, because you're going to be both a graduate student and also a teaching assistant. So you're going to have the burdens of being a student and the burdens of being a teacher at the same time. Also, you're not going to be paid well. I mean, on the positive side, you are kind of being paid to go to school instead of paying to go to school like it was for most people in undergrad, but you're not paid much, okay? So you get a tuition waiver and you get a small stipend, at least at most programs. And the stipend is like just enough to get by, to the point where it's the people who are most comfortable usually have some extra support from, say, like a spouse who has who makes some decent money, or other family members who help support them. So it can be difficult. Also, you have to take into account the fact that your preferences might change. So if right now you have sort of a mild desire to be a philosopher, and you also have other things that you might like to do, it's possible that if you dive into graduate work in philosophy and immerse yourself in that, your desire to be a professional philosopher will get stronger, but your chances of getting that job are still going to be very low. And so overall, that might make your situation worse, to like increase your desire without really increasing your chances to a realistic level, right? So that's something to be aware of and to watch out for. Also, you want to take into account, like, are you able to get into a program that's actually worth going to? Now, Liz is going to tell us in just a minute all about like how to select a good program. And so I'm not going to go into much detail on this, but I'm just going to make the generic point that, one thing to watch out for is not all graduate programs in philosophy are created equal. Some of them are higher quality than others. And there are some exceptions to this, but for the most part, it's probably not worth going to a program that is not accredited or not ranked. There are like rankings of the philosophy programs that you can look at. And I think Liz is going to tell us about that next. So I'm going to stop now.
Let me ask a couple of follow-up questions here. What are the chances of becoming a professional philosopher if you are willing to teach abroad, like in another country?
Yeah. So, I mean, what I would say is the comments that I was just making were taking into account jobs abroad. So It doesn't help at all. Like, so for example, my friend who was on the job market for 3 years and just accepted a high school teaching position. One of the few interviews he got was at a place in India. And because that he was also applying internationally, not just in the United States.
I will say, though,
Okay.
that it probably goes without saying it does increase your chances the more flexible you are with being willing to move. And also it increases your chances if you're willing to take a number of 1 to 2 year jobs, one after the other, and not demand that you get in a permanent job right out of grad school. So, you know, all of it is very, very unlikely, like Justin said, but there are things you can do to slightly increase your chances. And, you know, I had friends on the other hand who were extremely picky and applied to like 7 jobs a year, who I think otherwise would have been competitive candidates and didn't get anything, but they may have done better if they were willing to go international or something. So
yeah,
I'll say that too.
Yeah,
So I know Andrew Moon did something like that where he taught for a year or two at one place, and then he went to another. At one point he was at Rutgers, I think, and then he went somewhere else. Now, though, he's got a permanent position at Virginia Commonwealth University. Liz, is that the case with you? Are you like currently on a 1 to 2 year kind of thing at Ryerson, and then, or are you permanently there?
I got very lucky and I did get a permanent job at Ryerson, which was very nice. So I did a 1 year job in Australia first. But the nice thing about it was I actually had the job at Ryerson lined up. And so I was able to be at ANU and then not have to go on the job market again. And I could just know I was going straight to Ryerson after. And we're not going to talk a lot about the job market in particular. But I will say this also, I did apply for 99 jobs. And it was extremely time consuming. I also spent a lot of time before going on the market sending papers to journals, and just put tons and tons of effort into that to make the probability I had publications before I went in the job market much higher. Yeah. So I did put in that effort, and then I literally applied for every single job that I was eligible for. So, yeah. You know, there are things you can do to increase your chances. And I think I got lucky too there was a number of epistemology jobs the year I went on the market. And I think it very could have easily been another year. Almost every job I interviewed for was either like epistemology specific or like a philosophy of religion specific job. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was going to mention that too. Like, so if you're actually in graduate school, and there are things while you're in graduate school that you can do to increase your chances. And a couple of the big ones are what you just mentioned. Try to get some publishing, and especially in good journals. And that's a strategy that I've been really trying to pursue. Mm-hmm. And then also be careful about what area you select as like your areas of specialization and your areas of competence, what you specialize in and what you're able to teach. Because some of those areas are more popular than others and have more job openings than others.
Yeah, absolutely. I have more detail. If you go on my website, which is liz-jackson.com, under the teach service menu thing, I have this thing that's like 12 tips for grad school, philosophy grad school. And if you look at that, I have information about the job market and the things that I did and that Justin has been doing right as well to try to raise the probability of getting a job.
One more question before we move on from this slide. I thought this was a good question from SlamRN. Is it expensive applying for all these jobs?
No, it's essentially free. It's just very expensive with your time. Yeah. I'm trying to think. So, I mean, it depends on your setup. There are certain cases. So you have to send them your letters of recommendation, and there are softwares that you can basically use and that you have to pay for it that will send those for you. But at most major universities, your department secretary will send them, so you don't have to pay for that. I think that's the only case where I actually had to pay, or someone could have had to pay. I didn't pay, but someone could have had to pay for jobs. So it's not expensive. It's just very time consuming. A lot of times they want different things. They want a syllabi in X and Y, and you haven't made those, so you have to write those up really quick. They want a cover letter explaining why you're a good fit, so you have to rewrite the cover letter. And I did use templates, so that helps. But you want to personalize your cover letter for each school. So you can imagine applying for 100 jobs, keeping track of all the deadlines, making sure your letters of recommendation get in. I mean, it's quite a bit of work, and it takes quite a bit of organization. So,
and we'll get to this shortly, but maybe it's worth mentioning now since the question came up that applying to graduate programs can be expensive, and we'll talk about why that is.
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to Dr. Jackson.
All right. So let's say you have disregarded our previous advice and you said nope, or maybe you fit into some of the conditions that we gave earlier, and you're like, I'm doing it. Nonetheless, I'm going to apply to grad school. So then the next question I think that naturally arises is, well, which schools should I apply to? And something that Justin briefly mentioned earlier is that you should apply for schools that are at least ranked decently high. And we didn't put it on here, but probably the number one thing that you want to check is it's called the Philosophical Gourmet Report. And I think there'll probably be these slides available where you can click on the link, but if you also just Google that, it should come up. And basically what it is it's a ranking of philosophy PhD programs. They have like a top 50 ranking of US programs. And then I think if you look on that same website, maybe if you just scroll down on the page or something, there's rankings of programs outside the US as well. So like Cambridge and Oxford. And I think actually ANU is pretty good on there too. So like the number one school is like NYU, and then I don't remember the ranking, but Princeton is up there, and Yale is up there, and the University of Michigan is up there, and
Rutgers.
All these schools. Rutgers is like number 2. And like Rutgers, for example, it's not necessarily like this super prestigious Ivy League school, but in philosophy, it's really good. So these might not be things like, some of them are obviously not surprising that Princeton is good. Like, a lot of people probably could have guessed that, but some of these, they might not all be exactly what you would guess. And so, depending on your goals, a lot of people recommend that you apply to at least a good number of the top 20 schools. Those schools give you your best shot at, a lot of times jobs will look at the place where you got your PhD as one of the big considerations. And also those schools they'll just be highly respected. They'll probably be the ones that are going to be giving you a better stipend, et cetera, et cetera. But it's mostly just to ensure you'll be getting the quality training, and your PhD will be from a respectable place that jobs will respect. So what I often recommend to people, I mean, it does depend on your goal. So if you say philosophy professor or bust, then you should probably just apply to pretty high ranked programs. If you are really thinking you might want to do this philosophy thing and then maybe do something else afterwards, I would caution you again, your preferences can change, be careful. But if you think that, then maybe you could apply to a little bit bigger range of programs, and go to a program maybe just to learn more about philosophy rather than with the goal of necessarily becoming a philosophy professor. And then I also will note too, on the rankings, there's different rankings for certain areas. So there's rankings in epistemology, there's rankings in metaphysics, there's rankings in philosophy of religion. And if you're pretty set on working in a certain area of philosophy, it's also worth looking at what programs are good in that area. So I think that's all I was going to say about the rankings, but definitely look at those rankings. I was not really aware of them when I was applying, and I would have changed a lot of what I did if I knew about them. I think it worked out, but yeah, go ahead.
These slides are going to be in the description of the video. They're not there yet, but I will put them there once we're done, and you can click on these links that are in blue. That way you can easily access it.
Awesome. So the other thing is, you're thinking about, do I want to go to grad school? Should I do an MA or should I do a PhD? One thing that is interesting about philosophy is a lot of PhD programs will actually accept you right out of your bachelor's. And that actually was what happened to me. I did not do an MA. Justin did do an MA. So Justin, if you want to add some things at the end, you should feel free to do that. But I think we both sort of agree that in general, it can be a good idea to do an MA first. It's often only a 2-year program. And it's kind of a lower stakes way to get a sense of whether academic philosophy is for you. A lot of MA programs are also funded as well, so you're not going into debt. And again, I will reiterate, do not do an MA or a PhD that isn't fully funded is actually probably some pretty categorical advice I would give. Of course, there could be exceptions to that. Maybe you just have a lot of family money, or I don't know, but I think in general, I would not do it unless it's funded, which means that you're not paying tuition and you're getting some kind of stipend. So yeah, I think it's a good idea to do an MA. And then if you end up doing a PhD, it also just gives you more time to develop and to get publications out there. And, you know, if you do an MA and then you do 5 years of a PhD program, that's 7 years. Whereas if you're in a PhD program for 7 years, you're starting to get to the point where it's a little bit longer. And I think 7 years is normal, but 8, 9, 10 is where it's kind of like, that's a long time to be in a PhD program. So yeah, I think in general recommend looking at MA programs. And then here we have some good MA programs listed. And if you click on that link, I think it'll give you a more complete list. So these are all places that I think are relatively well respected and ones you should check out. And I think almost all of these will give you both a tuition waiver and a stipend. Not listed there is Ryerson, which is where I teach. I will say for Ryerson specifically, if you are Canadian, the funding is really good. It is unfortunately not as good for Americans, although I think it's getting better. So it's at least something to look at. We have like a number of philosophy of religion people there, and just some good philosophers doing. We have both analytic and continental philosophers. Another option is Talbot. Talbot is Biola University's philosophy of religion MA program. And I do think Talbot you do have to pay for, which is kind of unfortunate. But it does send a lot of people to PhD programs, and they have some good philosophers there. And they obviously do a lot of philosophy of religion. So it's something at least worth considering. I was going to apply to Talbot, but then once I ended up getting into Notre Dame, I didn't end up applying, but it was actually on my list. But I think when you're looking at these programs, you want to ask yourself, are these faculty, are they publishing in top journals? Not just publishing popular level books or articles for magazines or something, but are they actually publishing in good philosophy journals? And then, especially if you're interested in a PhD program, you want to look at these MA programs and say, what PhD programs have these students, are their students getting into? And I know on the Ryerson website, and I'm sure most of these schools, if you type in like Georgia State philosophy placement, you can see a list of the recent students and then what PhD programs they've been placed into. And then you can compare that to these philosophical gourmet report rankings and see, are these students getting placed into good PhD programs? This I would recommend, especially if you're looking to go to an MA, then to eventually do a PhD. Do you want to add anything, Justin or Jordan?
Sure. I'll just say, I mean, I don't have a whole lot to add other than, yeah, I did do a terminal master's degree in philosophy before starting my PhD, and I highly recommend it. It was a really positive experience. I think it is exactly what Liz said. It's a great way to kind of try out academic philosophy at a level of commitment that's less intense than committing to a 5 to 7 year PhD program. Also, it's a really good path to take for someone who, if you were not a philosophy major in undergrad, because that was my situation. I actually did not major in philosophy in undergrad, but I was able to get into a PhD program in philosophy by way of getting into an MA program and doing well there. So that's maybe one other thing I'd add about MA programs.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I actually think Talbot is sort of known for taking people that didn't major in philosophy, but then giving them that philosophical training and then placing people into good PhD programs. But I think a number of these schools would sort of fall into that category. And I guess the only downside to doing an MA that I can think of, one would be if you're going into debt for it, which I said you shouldn't do. But the only other downside is that it just takes a little bit longer to finish. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I really loved grad school and enjoyed spending a lot of time there. I mean, it is longer until you'll be getting paid, a little bit of a higher salary. And so I guess that's a downside. But I in my opinion, I think the benefits outweigh the costs there.
So before we move on, a couple of questions came in that I thought would be good to raise here. So one of them is from Jackson Howard, and he asked, is it a good idea to have publications before applying to grad school? And before you answer that, I'll mention this. So after that devastating slide 2 that Justin presented, I asked our friend Joe Schmidt at Majesty of Reason if he is going to rethink his life. And Joe told me, no, not rethinking my life. I've got a publication record that will help me. So what about this publication record?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I actually did a master's degree at a theological school, and then a master's degree just in philosophy at UW-Milwaukee. And I had a publication in the International Journal for Philosophy of Religion when I applied for the program in Milwaukee. And I think that it may have helped me get into that program. But that was the, I think at that point, I applied to like 5 programs in total, which is not very many. But at the time, I didn't really have anyone guiding me who knew what you were supposed to do. So that was the only one of the 5 that I got in. So the publication was definitely not like a magic bullet or anything like that. And then after, by the time I completed my my master's in just regular philosophy at Milwaukee, not the master's at the theological school, I had 2 more publications, one of them in a top 10 journal. And I applied to about 15, something like 15 PhD programs. I got accepted to, I think, 4 or 5 of them and waitlisted at maybe 3 or 4 others, something like that. And so, I mean, it's absolutely not a magic bullet having publications, but it certainly helps. It does not hurt, and it definitely helps. But you can't just like count on, oh, well, if I've got, a publication or 2, then I'm definitely gonna, get into the school of my dreams or something like that.
Yeah, and I'll add too that I just think it's kind of nuts how things are just happening earlier and earlier. Probably 20 years ago, no one had publications going on the job market. That was not expected. And now people are asking about publications before they're even in a PhD program. And so I think Justin's right to say it's not a magic bullet, but I also think we should say too, it's not at all required. And I honestly don't know if I would push people to try to publish that early. I didn't start publishing until midway through grad school, and I still feel like I don't know, I just feel like I started publishing really early and some of my ideas weren't even fully formed. And I mean, I don't regret it, but just publishing when you're an undergrad or doing a master's degree it's really intense and not at all required. And we're going to talk in a second about what's important for your application, but I really think having a good writing sample, I would emphasize a lot more than trying to publish something. Maybe trying to publish something would be evidence. You would then use that as your writing sample and it would be good. But I wouldn't push it. And another last thing I want to say really quick, there is also journal rankings. And I would highly recommend, do not publish things in no-name journals that no one's ever heard of. Like that might just hurt you, partially because there's a chance the quality might not be there either. So if you're going to publish, you need to aim, I would say a top 20 journal or a good specialist journal. And Justin did that. So, it wasn't like he was publishing in good journals, but if you publish in some no-name philosophy journal that no one's ever heard of, that's probably going to hurt you more than help you, and I would not recommend doing that. Similar probably with like grad student or even undergrad journals, those things exist. You can publish in them. I did. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but if you're like doing it so you can like become a philosophy professor, it's not really going to help, and it could hurt. So.
Got it. Okay, so here's the plan. Justin, I'm going to let you explain this slide about the parts of the application process. And then once you finish explaining this slide, I'm going to announce the first winner of the book giveaway.
Great. All right. Okay. So continuing down the line of thought that, maybe you've decided, despite certain serious disadvantages, that, I do want to apply to grad school. What is that actually like, the application process? So it's kind of complicated, to be honest. I mean, in some ways it's simple. You just send certain documents to the school that you're applying to by their deadline, and you give them what they ask for. But you have to do that in order to have a realistic chance of getting accepted somewhere, you have to do that like 15 to 20 times with 15 to 20 different schools, and you have to follow all of their separate little rules and requests about what they want. And the things that they want is a whole slew of documents that you're going to end up spending hours working on and preparing. The first of those that I want to tell you about is a writing sample. So a writing sample is a paper that you've written on a philosophical topic of some sort that you're going to send to the programs you're applying to, with the idea that this is meant to show them that you can do philosophy. It's meant to kind of show off your philosophical ability and to give evidence that you are qualified to be accepted to the programs that you are applying to. This is the most important part of an application because in general, admissions committees, or so I'm told, to give more weight to the writing sample than to the other parts of the application. And so you want this to be your best work. It also, to some extent, I mean, it's a good idea to strategize about like the topic of your writing sample. So for example, some of the things that I was told, there are certain topics at any given time in philosophy that are kind of trendy. And so it could potentially be to your advantage to write on a trendy topic. Maybe more significantly, it's to your advantage to write on a topic that fits with maybe what you're looking to study when you work on when you do your PhD, because you're going to be applying to programs where there are philosophers who publish in those areas. And so it kind of shows that, you fit with that department and the things that they think about in that department, right? I was also told, and this is both times when I applied for, the first time I did applications and got into a MA program, and also the second time when I applied and got into a PhD program, both times I was advised not to use a writing sample on a topic in philosophy of religion, even though I do a lot of work in philosophy of religion. It's one of my areas of specialization. And if I remember right, I think the reasons for this were some people had worries about like prejudice against theism. I think, maybe there is some prejudice against theism in some areas or some departments, though I think probably there's a lot less of it now than there was. I'm not sure, though. Another thing that I seem to remember is something like this, that, a lot of philosophers will just find it easier to assess your sort of philosophical ability if you write on a topic that is just within a mainstream core area of philosophy, like metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and value theory, instead of something in philosophy of religion that's kind of on the periphery. I once heard somebody describe philosophy of religion as a minor corner of philosophy, and in some ways that's right. It's certainly the way a lot of people in philosophy view it. It's a very big corner, though, and you can see that just by going on Phil papers and comparing the amount of work that's been published in that area to the amount of work that's been published in other subdisciplines. But okay, so that's some stuff about the writing sample. You're going to want to have guidance, by the way, on your writing sample. It usually starts out as a term paper that's written for a philosophy class that you took, but then you develop it further after the class with the guidance of a relevant professor. Now, this can make things complicated if you didn't major in philosophy in undergrad like I did. So maybe it would be useful for me to explain how I pulled this off, because you do need some actual philosophy professors to help you through the application process, because you're also going to need them to write your letters of recommendation. So here's what I ended up doing. At that theological school that I went to for my first MA, they had at the time a program specifically devoted to philosophy of religion. So it wasn't really like a philosophy MA. It was very like niche and focused on religious topics. But I took, there were philosophy classes, and I took some classes there. And then I took some random philosophy classes at other schools as well, where I just took like one class at this school and one class at this other school as a non-degree seeking student. And in that way, I was able to accumulate like people who would write letters of recommendation for me and get people who could give me advice on a writing sample and stuff like that. Okay, so that's the writing sample. Letters of recommendation is the second most important thing on your application. These are letters written by your professors, philosophy professors of classes that you took, that are basically recommending you to the departments that you're applying to, saying like, yeah, this is student shows promise as a philosopher, and they would be successful in your program, or they're likely to succeed in your program. Now, these letters, you don't get to see them. The letters are sent directly from the letter writers to the institutions that you're applying to. So you don't get to see what they're writing about you. But typically, someone will only agree to write a letter for you if they think they can write a good letter for you, one that's going to help you. But that makes it extremely important that when you're taking philosophy classes, you want to work hard, and you want to make sure that you do good work, and that the professor sees that you do good work, and that you give the you get to know the professor a little bit, or give them a chance to get to know you a little bit, so that you can later come and ask them, will you write a letter of recommendation for me? Because they're not going to do that if they don't know you, or if you didn't do good work, right? They're just gonna decline to write you a letter. Okay, so that's the second thing you need. A third thing you're going to need for most applications is a statement of purpose. And this is a short document. I think they're supposed to be about a page, where you say something about like, what your philosophical interests are, what you might be interested in, what topics you might be interested in pursuing in graduate school. You might say something about your qualifications, like what qualifies you to be a graduate student in this department that you're applying to. You might even say something about, how you are a good fit for this department that you're applying to. And if you do that, you will end up, writing a whole bunch of different versions of your statement of purpose, because you'll be tailoring them to the different programs that you're applying to. So that's another component. You're also going to need to have your transcripts sent to every school or program that you apply to. And also, and for some people this won't make any difference, and for some people it'll make a big difference, you're going to need your transcripts from every single college or university that you have ever taken a class at. And for me, this was a huge pain, because I've taken a lot of random classes at a lot of different schools, and every time I applied to a program, I had to get transcripts sent from like 7 different places, and it was really annoying. But anyway, you do have to have your transcript sent. Philosophy grades are what matter the most. Other grades, not so much. You may also have to take the GRE. All right, so Liz mentioned the GRE earlier. It's a test that you take before applying to graduate school, and it has like a math part and like a writing part. And it used to be that like pretty much every philosophy program required you to take the GRE, because they required GRE scores when you applied. But more and more philosophy programs have dropped that requirement in the last few years, especially because they've started to see that there are some really good reasons, both moral and practical reasons, not to require students to take the GRE. And so I think maybe the thing to do about the GRE, because it is both like financially costly and costly in terms of time, look at like the programs that you think you're most interested in applying to. And if most of them don't require the GRE, it might be worth not even taking it and only applying to programs that don't have that requirement. But if enough of them do have that requirement, then it would make sense to take it. That's, I think, what I would recommend at this point, where we're kind of like in this weird moment, this sort of awkward position where a lot of people have started to drop the GRE requirement, but it hasn't become standard to drop it yet. So yeah, anyway. Okay, and then finally, when you apply to these programs, there's typically an application fee. And if you're applying to 15 to 20 programs, those fees can really add up. And so that's why I said earlier, it can potentially be expensive to apply to graduate programs, right? Like Liz said, it's not expensive to apply to the jobs, but applying to the programs can be expensive because of the application fees, the GRE is expensive, and transcripts, sometimes you have to pay to have your transcripts sent from one institution to another as well. The good news is that there are fee waivers in some cases for the application fee. So that's one bit of silver lining.
Can I add
Okay.
a couple things?
Yeah, go ahead, Liz.
Oh, well, so the I guess all on that last thing, yeah, I paid probably between $1,500 and $2,000. I think I applied to 12 schools. And I also, maybe we should have said this, most people apply to like 12 to 15 schools. I've heard people applying to like as many as 20 or 25. Some people apply to like 3 or 4. I probably wouldn't recommend that, but because it's not significantly more work to add more, and it will increase your chances quite a bit. Maybe you have some kind of geographical limitations, and then maybe you should apply to less. But in most cases, I think I would recommend applying to at least 10. But I will say for transcripts and the GRE and the application fee, well, one, I think as long as you just meet an income requirement, you can get almost all your application fees waived, and you just email like the department secretary. And I regret that because I could have saved some money. So I don't know if everyone would waive it, but I think most would. For the transcripts in the GRE, what I did is I actually had official transcripts sent to myself. And then I did a high quality scan of that official transcript, and I sent those, and I sent the high quality GRE scores to all the schools, even if they requested official ones, and everyone accepted that. And a lot of them will say you have to do official, but then you don't actually have to unless you're accepted, and then you accept that offer. So there might be a tiny bit of risk, but I don't think they're going to throw your application out if you do that. So I actually saved a lot of money by doing that. So I didn't actually send the transcripts directly from like K-State to the school. I just sent them like a high quality PDF. So I wanted to say that. And then the last thing I wanted to say was just 2 quick things about the writing sample. And I agree with everything Justin said. I also just wanted to add a question that I get a lot is, does it have to add to the literature? Does it have to be a novel argument? And I think the answer is definitely not. It does not have to be a novel argument. It's not being held to the same standards that a publication would be held to. And I think the most important thing for the writing sample is that it shows philosophical skill. It shows that you can make an argument and defend that argument. It shows that you can object to an argument. You don't have to worry about citing all the relevant literature on that topic. You don't have to worry about if this is a novel contribution or if someone else published this, but you want it to show philosophical skills. So I think that's the most important thing. And then the other thing I wanted to say on the writing sample is just try to get as much feedback as you can. And I think I sent my writing sample to like every philosopher I came in contact with. Like someone gave a talk at K-State. I was like, hey, you want to give me comments on my writing sample? And a lot of them didn't have time, and that was totally fine. But I sent it to like every professor I was like even remotely had a relationship with, and I think I ended up getting like 12 different people to comment on it. It's just helpful to get a lot of eyes on it and to make it as polished as you can. So I agree, it's like the most important part, and you really just want to put a lot of effort into it. And probably what I should have done is put less effort into trying to memorize GRE vocabulary words and more effort into my writing sample. So that's how I would have done it differently.
Yeah. So maybe another point related to that is if you do the terminal MA thing, you do the MA before the PhD. One thing that's cool about that is that the MA programs, or at least like the ones that we listed on the previous slide, the ones that are like the best at least, usually are designed with the idea of helping you get into a good PhD program. So like when I was doing my MA, we actually had a class that was devoted to getting your writing sample in shape and getting feedback on it and so forth. So the MA thing that's another advantage of the doing the MA first kind of route.
I was going to ask one more question about this, and then we'll announce the first winner. So it seems like, say you've got someone who did not major in philosophy, and maybe they took only one philosophy class, or maybe even none. And then afterward, they're like me, and they get out and they're like, okay, I think I want to become a professional philosopher despite everything that Liz and Justin tell me. So it seems like at that point, if I send in a transcript and there's no philosophy classes on it, then would you say pretty much they're just going to look at it and laugh and then throw it out?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would think it would put you at a serious disadvantage if you had no philosophy classes at all. Do you think that, Liz, or?
Yeah, I mean, if you were in a really unique situation where you had no philosophy classes, but somehow had like letters of recommendation from philosophers and a really good writing sample, I mean, I think committees might be confused, but you might have a chance at like, especially some of the MA programs we were talking about that accept non-philosophy majors. I don't want to say it's like a good chance, but it's a chance. But I think a lot of people actually do what Justin did and take a class or two, not for credit. My friend who actually she now teaches in Tampa, she also did her PhD at Notre Dame. She did this exact thing as well, where she wasn't a philosophy major, but she just took a few philosophy classes at like a local school, and was able to get like letters of recommendation from that, and then had those on her transcript. So I would say it's actually going to be really hard to get a good writing sample and good letters of recommendation if you haven't taken any philosophy classes.
Yeah. So it's not just the matter of not having any philosophy classes on your transcript or whatever, right? It's if you haven't taken any classes, who are you going to ask to write those letters? Who are you going to ask to look at your writing sample? That kind of a thing. I mean, I guess at this point I'm just repeating what Liz said, so never mind, I'll stop.
Yeah, it's not impossible, but it puts you in a tough position for sure.
Gotcha. All right. All right, so I wanted to announce the first winner. So let me take this back to the normal view. Let me briefly explain what this is. So in order to create really solid content for this channel and be able to invest the time in it to, make that content great for you, it takes a lot of time on my part. However, to invest that time in the channel, I need to be able to make some money while doing it, because otherwise what's happening right now is I'm having to work little side jobs in addition to my full-time job, and then that takes away time from this channel. So I'm very grateful for the 39 patrons that I have, and of the patrons that I have, 6 submitted questions. So 6 of them were entered into the book giveaway, and the first winner, there will be 2 winners that I announced. The first winner is going to be Brandon Broxton, and I guess I'll go ahead and read his question. And what I'll say about this is, each of these questions that I announce, they will be turned into an Ask a Scholar video. So I'll contact a scholar who specializes in this topic and get them to answer it. Okay, so Brandon's question was, say one has what they believe to be a properly basic belief in God. How would this affect one's priors when evaluating the evidence for the existence of God? Should this make arguments for God's existence more compelling for this person? Why or why not? So thank you for that question, Brandon. And if you heard that question, you're like, priors, what's that? Properly basic belief, what's that? Don't worry, we'll get you caught up in the video with the scholar. Okay, let's get back to the slides. There's only a few more, and we'll be wrapping up. So choosing a grad program. This one's Liz's.
All right. So yeah, a couple things. So let's say you've done the application process, you've applied to at least 12 to 15 schools, and maybe you have a couple different schools that you're considering or looking at, and you're trying to choose between them. I mean, first of all, you're already in a good situation that you've been accepted into multiple programs. I know a lot of people that I have a friend, and I think he's a great philosopher, and he actually applied to grad programs 2 years in a row and didn't get into any. He got waitlisted at a couple, but he didn't end up actually getting into any schools either year, which is sad. But it is competitive. And actually a lot of the things Justin was saying about the job market, they apply to grad schools as well, especially post-COVID. This past year, at least, a number of schools didn't take grad students at all. And so then the schools that were taking grad students got flooded with more applications because some of them just pulled out. And I'm not sure how that is going to look this next year. I guess none of us can really fully predict the future, but COVID has definitely affected this and made it more competitive. So I will say that too. So I guess that's another thing to maybe think about as well when you're even thinking about applying to grad school, is you could put a lot of time and effort into this and then end up not getting in anywhere. So yeah, that might be another reason to think really long and hard before you apply. But let's say you are in multiple, you're in multiple programs, and you're trying to decide between them. So here's a couple of things you might think. You might do. So the first is you should try to visit the schools if you can. And a lot of schools will have, they'll pay for you to come visit, and they'll have even like a weekend where a bunch of the admitted students all come visit, and they get to meet each other and meet the current grad students, and you can talk to the professors that you're interested in and sort of see, what is the town like, and you usually get a lot of free food, which is great. And so definitely visit if you can. And then if maybe you're on a waiting list and you get admitted later, at least at Notre Dame, you could still often visit even if it wasn't during that weekend. It would just be, at a different time. And in some cases, if you can't visit, you can at least Skype with the professors or Skype with current grad students, or, Zoom or whatever. And I would recommend all of that, kind of getting as much information about each program as you can. But I do think visiting is the most effective way to kind of see, is this a place I could see myself? Would this be a good fit for me? Another thing is, like Justin mentioned, a lot of these programs do have stipends. The stipends vary from, I think the lowest I've heard of is $14,000, and I think the highest I've heard of is around $40,000. And the stipend is important, but I think what you also want to look at is the stipend relative to the cost of living, because if you're getting, $35,000, but you're in New York City and you're, gonna be paying $2,500 a month in rent or whatever. I don't know if it's actually that high, but it's really high.
Probably.
Yeah. Then that's very different than maybe, actually Notre Dame, I think was one of the best stipend cost of living ratios. I think our stipend was around 25, but it's so cheap to live in South Bend. I paid $300 a month in rent every month. And I lived in a pretty nice house, pretty close to campus. So definitely look at both the stipend, but then also ask grad students, where do you live and how much are rents normally around here? And, just think about those kinds of expenses. I think another thing that's really important to think about when choosing a grad program is asking really specific questions about the grad student community, about the philosophy department, about the advisors that you're considering working with. And then also, especially if you're wanting an academic job, wanting to be a professional philosopher, look at where that program has been placing people. Have they been placing people in tenure track jobs, or have they only been placing people in temporary jobs? And how many of their students have been placed? And most of them, again, if you type in New York University philosophy placement, you can bring up a placement page and you can sort of see where their recent placements are. And it should say on there whether they're tenure track or not. Tenure track is good. Not tenure track isn't necessarily bad, but it kind of depends. Some people will get really good postdocs, and that's good. But if they're just getting an adjunct position, that wouldn't be as good. So, and then you want to think about the professors that you're considering working with. A really important part of grad school is your advisor, the person who's going to kind of walk you through the dissertation process. And your advisor is supposed to help you with the job market as well. That's one of their big jobs. And so you want to say, well, if I have my heart set on working with Professor X, you want to figure out, well, are they planning to retire soon? Is there a good possibility that they're going to move and go to another school? I mean, that could really throw a wrench in your plans. And you might not have a certain professor that your heart is set on, and that's fine. But if you do, you should definitely keep that in mind. You should also try to talk to students that are working with the professors that you're interested in working with, or just ask the students about their advisors. So, how often do they give you comments on papers? How often do you meet together? Are their comments helpful for you? Have they helped you give you publication advice? Have they helped give you job market advice? What is the job market process like? Do they have a system that helps walk you through applying for jobs? And these are all questions you want to be asking. And then also asking questions like, how are the grad students with each other? Are they more competitive? Are they more collaborative? Do they hang out with each other? What kind of things do grad students here do for fun? And kind of trying to get a sense if you can of the community and the climate, and how it is sort of to be a grad student there. So I don't know if either of you want to add anything or.
Sounds good to me.
All right, moving right along. Thank you. It's funny. I feel like Liz got all the very positive sounding slides and Justin got all the very negative sounding ones. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it's like good cop, bad cop right now.
We just like switched off like one after the other, but yeah. I don't know.
It's funny because the number of views, like when Liz is talking, I can see the number of people watching and the number gradually goes up. And then when Justin starts to talk and is delivering bad news, it's going down. And then when I start to talk, it plummets. So,
oh, shucks. Well,
but we've got 30 people watching, so this is good for me.
All
okay.
right.
So Justin, fill us in. What do we expect year to year in grad school?
Yeah, what does it actually look like to go through a graduate program in philosophy? So I'm going to start with a terminal MA program and what that typically looks like. I'll try to do this, quickly. So a terminal MA program is usually a 2-year program, and you'll be taking courses throughout those 2 years. There'll be graduate level philosophy courses. You will also most likely, in most cases, you'll also be working as a TA during those 2 years. And a TA is a teaching assistant. And typically, as a teaching assistant, your job looks like this. You get assigned to a certain professor who is teaching an undergraduate class of some sort. Like it could be like Intro to Philosophy, for example. And your job as a teaching assistant is to show up to that professor's lectures. And there's usually a couple lectures per week. And then at the end of the week, the students in that class will have a discussion section where they get to have a class discussion about the content from the lecture. And it's the TA's job usually to lead the discussion section. So it's kind of like your first exposure to teaching undergraduate students. So it's like the training wheels portion of learning to be a professor and teach college classes. Another part of your workload as a TA will be grading. Typically, the professor that you are working for will make you do all the grading for the class. So that's another part of the work. So for 2 years, then in an MA program, you're going to be doing this coursework, and at the same time, you're going to have these TA duties. And then at the end of the program, you're going to do some kind of a thesis or some other sort of final paper project, where the standards are going to be a little bit higher than they would be for just an ordinary term paper for a class, and you have to defend it and pass the defense, and then you get your MA in philosophy. So that's a typical terminal MA. Now, what about a typical PhD program in philosophy? Okay, so officially, these are supposed to be 5-year programs. And some programs are pretty strict about getting people through in 5 years. Liz was actually telling me this because I actually didn't know that. I'm not in one of the strict programs. For the programs that aren't strict about it, it's actually extremely common. And my impression is it's the majority of people take more than 5 years. They take 6, 7 years, and in a few cases, even longer than that. But here's what those 5 or more years typically look like. The first 2 years are going to look a lot like what I just described with the terminal MA. You're going to be taking coursework, you're going to be doing coursework, and those courses are all going to be graduate level courses in philosophy. And you're going to be working as a TA, doing all the things that I described TAs as doing. So you'll have, your TA teaching job to do, and you'll also have your job as a student. And then year 3 is where things can often start to get a little bit different. It's usually somewhere in year 3 that you finish up the coursework requirement. You're still going to be TAing at that point. But also at this point, you begin to get to the part of the program where you're going to switch from coursework to dissertation. And almost always, there's some kind of a milestone that you have to sort of meet in order to make that transition. So it might be one or more exams that you have to pass, or it might be one or more qualifying papers that you have to write and defend. And again, that would just be like a paper where the standards are higher than an ordinary term paper, but it usually starts as an ordinary term paper. Or it might be a combination of those things. It might be a qualifying paper and an exam of some sort. And you have to pass those things in order to get to move on to the dissertation component. And that often happens around year 3. This is all kind of flexible though, and it's different for different people. People go at different paces. Okay, and then in year 4, typically is when you're going to start working on your dissertation. And the first thing you have to do is you have to come up with a dissertation proposal. So you have to come up with a plan of like, okay, this is what I want to write my dissertation about. And then you have to defend the proposal and get that proposal passed before you can actually write the dissertation. And a lot of programs make, a big deal about the dissertation proposal. I'm in a program that kind of, I think, somewhat anomalously doesn't make a big deal out of it. It's more like, as soon as I passed the qualifying paper and the exam and so forth, it was like, okay, start your dissertation. And then there was just and at some point you should, write up a prospectus and send it to the graduate school or whatever. So that's a little bit different. Usually from what I've heard, they're a little bit more official and ceremonial about the proposal. But anyway, okay, so you're going to do that. And also around year 4, I think it's fairly common at this point to transition from being a teaching assistant to teaching your own class. And that's kind of cool in some ways, because all of a sudden you are in control of the content of your class. You get to make all the calls. You get to, just decide all right, I'm going to talk about this and not that, right? It's all in your control. But it's also a bit of extra work because you're now responsible for writing up your own syllabus. You're the one who's giving the lectures. You're the one who's got to create the assignments and so forth. And also, you still have to do the grading because at least in the vast majority of cases that I'm aware of, graduate students don't get their own TAs. So it is more work. But I mean, if you like teaching, I think it's great and it's really rewarding. I really enjoy teaching my own classes. I actually had a weird situation where I was able to teach my own class in the second year that I was in my terminal MA program. And then when I started my PhD, it was like I had to start over because they started me back at TAing, and then I had to wait until year 3 or 4 somewhere before I could teach my own class again. But anyway, okay. So, and then years 5 to 6, at this point, you're working on your dissertation. You're hopefully going to get to the end of it sometime soon. You're still going to be teaching. So you've got the teaching duties going on in the background. But also around this point, you're going to start applying to jobs. And we've already talked about, Liz was talking about it a couple of slides ago, about how actually demanding and involved that is. So there's definitely a strain there on your time where you've got, you got to write a dissertation, you got to teach it a class. Fortunately, it's usually only one class at a time if you're a graduate student. And you've got to apply to a bunch of jobs. And then the final thing is defending your dissertation. When your dissertation is done, right? And this means you've sent it to all of the people on your dissertation committee and they've all signed off and said, yeah, this is ready to be defended, right? Then you actually do your dissertation defense, which is usually mostly just a formality because they don't typically let you defend your dissertation until your committee doesn't let you until they're confident that, yeah, you're going to pass. And ideally, you wait and defend your dissertation until after you've lined up the job that you're going to go to when you finish the program. But that's ideally, and we've been talking about how non-ideal the jobs are. I won't keep going about that. All right.
Yeah.
Anything to add, Liz?
Well, I was just going to say, I think something we maybe left off the list, but is I guess sort of part of writing your dissertation, but also separate is publishing. I think it's super important. I tell people, if you can, try to start sending papers off in years 3 or 4. And then by the time you're years 5 to 6, I recommend having 3 to 5 papers under review. And one way to do this, which is what I did, is I actually wrote my dissertation chapters exactly in the form I would send to a journal. So I didn't have them reference each other. I didn't try to make it like a book. I just wrote separate chapters, and then I just sent that chapter straight to a journal once I had some feedback on it. I did a lot of conferencing as well in grad school, and so I was able to get feedback from conferences as well, and that helped. But don't send the papers off too early. Don't just like write something up in one day and then send it to a journal. But I do think publishing early and trying to get things under review and trying to get your dissertation published at good journals is a very important part of grad school, especially if you're going to be going on the job market. And like, we don't need to go into all of this here, but it can take a very long time to get published. And so you can't send something off a few months before you apply for a job and expect to have a publication. You need to be doing it years in advance. So that's another thing that your time can be taken up with in grad school.
Yep, absolutely.
So Liz, let me ask you about that. So how many chapters was your dissertation?
So my dissertation was 5 chapters plus a kind of long introduction. So I guess it was technically like 6, but I didn't try to publish the introduction. And I actually ended up publishing 4 of the 5 chapters. And then the 1 chapter I sort of split into multiple papers, which I then published. So yeah, I mean, I really think writing it up in the form to send it directly to journals was super helpful for me. Another thing that I did is I would send my dissertation chapters before they were written to conferences that only required an abstract. And then I would actually present the paper before the paper was fully written out and get a bunch of feedback on it from people at conferences. And then I was able to, I think, write the chapters in their original form as higher quality than if I just sort of wrote a draft without thinking about it very much. And actually, that's something I do now a lot too, is I'll present a paper before it's written and then get a bunch of feedback before I write the paper, and then your draft. It's not necessarily like immediately ready to send to a journal. I still think you should have some other people look at it and try to improve it, but I think it definitely helps with publishing. And it's interesting too, I'll say one last thing. I had 2 advisors actually. My advisors helped with publishing a little bit, but honestly, people like Andrew Moon and my friends, some of them were a few years ahead of me, whether it was a grad student at Notre Dame, some of the postdocs there, people I had met at conferences, they were actually the ones that really helped me and gave me really good publishing advice and sort of helped me know, how do you respond to referee comments? And I mean, publishing could be honestly its whole own video, but I mentioned that 12 tips for grad school in philosophy. I do talk a good amount about publishing there, so you can get some more information from that.
Awesome. One more thing about that. So then, I have not read your dissertation, but I should. But the chapters are unrelated then, so it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to flow from one thing to the next.
I mean, my chapters were all on belief and credence, so every single one was on that theme, and then it was kind of like a post hoc, I kind of put a structure onto it afterwards. I will say for the job market, what you're doing on the job market is you're marketing yourself. You're showing why your work is valuable and why people should be interested in what you're writing about and why they should want to hire you. And some jobs either require a research statement or a dissertation summary or both. And so you want some kind of narrative that sort of brings your chapters together. I've seen people be successful that had 3 papers, one on evidentialism, one on something else in epistemology, and then one on formal epistemology, or so, so it was these 3 kind of not super connected papers. But I think normally that's less advisable, and you want to at least have your chapters on the same theme. But my chapters, it does not read like a book at all. Maverick Christian is commenting that he read my dissertation, which is amazing. I love that he read it. But yeah, so they're really standalone chapters, and they're on a related theme. But a lot of people, I think this is becoming a much more common way that people are doing it. It's very unlikely you're going to get a book contract with a really good press for your dissertation. People do it, but it's unlikely. But it's much more likely that you'll get a chapter or 2 published in a journal, and that's, I think, normally the strategy that is advised. At least it's the strategy that should be advised.
Yep.
Okay, one more thing, because I'm curious. Justin, here go the views again. Every time I talk, we start dropping. I've got to ask though, Justin, what's your dissertation on?
Oh, it's about sortal changes in ordinary objects. So it's like objects turning into other types of objects, like a lump of clay being molded into a statue, or to take extreme cases from fiction, like the stuff in Harry Potter where somebody turns into a cat or whatever. So it's a metaphysics dissertation.
Cool. Okay.
Can I add one last thing on this slide? Oh,
Yes.
I don't want to drag us on too long. It's just something that Andrew Moon actually said when we were all chatting about this that I thought was helpful. And I think one thing that philosophy grad school really does for you, and in a way it's actually like painful and difficult, but it like puts your ideas under the fire. It puts your ideas under like really intense criticism, and you're always like, you're put in these situations where you're either getting a professor that's commenting on your paper. Some professors will have students comment on each other's papers. Sometimes you'll raise your hand in class and say something, and then you'll get immediate feedback whether that made sense or not. You'll do a presentation in class, and then all these hands will come up with objections and comments that they have. And it really, the training is great. And these people that are giving you this fire are professional trained philosophers that basically think for a living. They're really smart and they know a ton of stuff. And so you just learn and you grow so much. And even like, at an informal department reception, you're just talking to people about philosophy and learning about philosophy and getting feedback on your ideas. And I do think this is something that Andrew emphasized that I think is right. It's something that's a lot harder to get if you're just self-training or watching YouTube videos or reading books. You can learn stuff from that, but your ideas aren't being put under fire in the same way, and you're not interacting with these super sharp philosophers to the same level. And so I do think there's training and there's huge benefits for going through this kind of thing that I think are really hard to get by just being self-taught.
Absolutely.
All right. Next one. Let's see. How many more? Okay.
3 more. 2 more, really.
Yeah. 2 more, really.
Yeah.
Okay. Liz.
Okay. So going on our positive versus negative theme, I guess, these are some really great things about grad school. And I know some of these might be sort of specific to my experience. So maybe Justin, if you have anything to add or things that you're like, that's not really true for me, you can let me know. So the first thing is great. You get paid to study philosophy. That's awesome. Again, it's not great pay, but it is still pay, and it's really fun. You get to learn and study, and you get to learn about so many different areas of philosophy, which is awesome. It's basically your job. You talk to philosophers, you go to colloquium, which is like a speaker that many departments will have weekly or bi-weekly, that they just come and talk about their research. You're in classes, all the things that Justin was talking about in the previous slide, and you get paid to do that. So it's really great. It's a lot of people's dream. It was my dream for sure. And on that same note, there's a lot of chances to talk philosophy with people around you, and you're just constantly learning. I just feel like almost every day you're just like learning something new. That's true when you're a professor too, I think, but maybe not to the same extent, because as a grad student, you're interacting with all these other grad students that are also mostly in philosophy. You're interacting with these professors. And I think you're just, especially when you're in classes, you're taking classes on maybe topics you haven't thought about as much. And you're just always learning, which is great. And your job is to like read philosophy articles and write philosophy papers. And it's a great time to learn. So for me, I think this is probably true in general. The social aspect of grad school is really great. At least, so at Notre Dame, there was, I want to say, is this right? Like 75 grad students. So there's a lot of grad students. We're a really big program at Notre Dame. But there's just all these other people. They're in a similar stage of life to you. They're also studying philosophy. You often have common interests, and they're kind of at that stage of life where they're still social, like they still want to socialize a lot and hang out on weekends. I mean, some have kids, and that limits it a little bit. But I just felt like the community and my social life at Notre Dame was great. And you might go from this huge program with like 40 to 75 grad students to a department with like 2 or 3 other philosophers, or even less. And so, I think you're around more philosophers and you have more opportunities to socialize than you'll probably have in other situations. It's kind of like continuing college for like 5 to 7 more years, which I liked college. So that was fun for me. Another thing, I think it's fair to say that you have more free time than you would in a tenure track job or a 9-to-5 job. Whether you actually have a lot of free time in absolute terms just depends on other parts of your life. If you're caretaking, if you're a parent, what else you have going on. So I don't want to say categorically everyone's just going to have lots of free time in absolute terms. But, I was single, I didn't have kids. I had a lot of free time in grad school, and that's really great. And that's something I now miss, I guess. So you just, like Justin said, you will teach maybe one class a semester, but often even less. At Notre Dame, we only taught about 50% of the semesters. So a lot of semesters you just had off to do research, work on your dissertation, whatever. This is, not counting the first 2 years when you're in classes, but you just have a really flexible schedule, and you can do a lot of things outside of philosophy as well. I had a lot of time to go to the gym and play sports and do some, I was involved in the community and church, and you just have a lot of time, which is nice. Again, not for everyone, but I think you have more free time than you would in a normal job. And then I guess also on that note, you largely get to set your own schedule. So in your first 2 years, you'll probably have maybe 3 classes, maybe 4 at the most, that meet for 3 hours a week. So that's 9 hours. Those will be, probably in 3-hour blocks. But besides that, you often don't really have a lot of commitments. Maybe you have to go to colloquium or something. But, that's nothing close to the average 40-hour a week job. So you have a lot of time that you can do what you want with. And if you want to work from 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. you can, it's super flexible, which is great. That's also actually a feature, I will say, of being a philosophy professor that I really enjoy. You can largely set your own schedule apart from your scheduled classes, which is really nice. But then, so that's your first 2 years. Then when you're doing your exam or qualifying papers or whatever, your dissertation proposal and your dissertation, oftentimes, maybe you're teaching a class, but maybe not even, and you literally just work and whatever you want, basically. So it's really convenient. And I guess I should say too, again, maybe this is qualified by if you have kids and if they're in daycare and when you have to do those kinds of responsibilities. But you can really work when you want, at least from the perspective of the grad program. And I know even in these later years, I know people Notre Dame is about 2 hours from Chicago. So sometimes people would live in Chicago because they didn't really have to be in South Bend that much. So sometimes you can even do it remotely. And it's a really flexible job, which is really nice. You also have summers off, which is great. You can write your dissertation, you can go to conferences. I did a bunch of workshops in the summers, which I really enjoyed, which are extended conferences that often last a week or two. And you really get to know the people at the workshops. And it's, again, just a great time to learn. You can travel. I did a lot of traveling. I really love traveling. You can also just chill. I know people that would take multiple months off. Maybe that's not always advisable, but there is flexibility, like I said. There is a good amount of free food, at least when there's not a pandemic going on. And I also think this depends on your institution, right? But free food is great. Who doesn't love free food? And at least at Notre Dame, there was a lot of opportunities for free food if you knew what listservs to get on. So, and then another thing I loved about grad school, this maybe won't fit everyone's preferences, but there was just tons of opportunities to go to sporting events. So I got football tickets. I got to go to the football games, basketball tickets. I was a huge fan of Notre Dame women's basketball. As you can see as my basketball there, maybe you could have guessed that. But also you could play sports. We were able to play intramurals. So I played basketball, we played flag football, we did volleyball, we did a bunch of different sports. And that was just a super fun thing. But if sports isn't your thing, there's probably opportunities to get involved in whatever your hobby is. It's a college campus. There's just a lot of things going on. And then also I encourage people to try to get involved in the broader community, both meeting people outside of the philosophy department, grad students in other departments, but also meeting people even outside of your institution.
Cool.
Awesome. So Liz makes it sound like
it's the best.
Everyone needs to do this. So now it's time for Justin to come in and lay the law.
Back to the bad cop. Okay. A lot of these things we've already mentioned, so I'll just be quick here. So the things that make grad school hard, the tight finances, we've talked about that. All right. You don't have a lot of money. It works best if you have support from a spouse or some other family member. Time management can be challenging and in different ways. So I think earlier in the program, it's especially challenging because you're juggling your teaching and student life together along with any other things going on in your life, and you have to figure out how to fit all this together. When you get to the dissertation stage, I think the notorious problem that people talk about is you've got this long-term project with not very many strict deadlines and not a lot of structure imposed from the outside. It's only whatever structure you kind of impose on yourself. And a lot of people just aren't good at that and aren't good at handling projects of that sort. And so there are time management challenges there as well. It can be competitive. Liz talked earlier about how, some programs have more of a competitive environment and some of them have more of a sort of mutually supportive environment. And so that's definitely one thing you want to look out for when you're trying to choose a program. I think that's the context in which Liz was talking about it earlier. You want to try to get a sense of like, okay, what's the environment here like? Is it like a cutthroat sort of environment? Or is it more of a like, okay, everybody's trying to help each other succeed kind of environment? And fortunately, I mean, for me at UMass, we have that kind of like everybody supporting each other kind of environment. I really, really love it here. So a plug for UMass philosophy department. It can also be discouraging. So Liz was talking a minute ago about the point that Andrew Moon made while we were preparing for this about how, you sometimes just get torn apart. Like I think that was maybe one of the phrase that Andrew used. He said like, a case like this where you get up in front of a class and you present some work and the class just like tears it apart or the professor just tears it apart, right? I mean, this sort of thing can happen and it can be discouraging. I've also seen people, I went through this, I've seen this happen with other people where, you don't realize when you start how much you have still to learn when you get into a philosophy program, and you often don't realize how like not good you are at clearly expressing your ideas, and you have to discover that like, oh yeah, this person totally misread me, but it was my fault, not theirs. I just wasn't as clear as I thought I was, right? This is something that I went through this. I've seen other people go through that, and so that can potentially discourage, right? When you get things like that happen. So that's something, to be aware of. And then also it's just sort of like a notorious issue that mental health problems are rampant among graduate students. And one particular mental health issue that is kind of specific to the graduate student experience is imposter syndrome, which is this thing where you have this lingering sense that, you're an imposter. You're not really qualified to be in this department. And somehow everybody else is mistaken about your being qualified to be there. And so you're insecure about that. And that's a common thing that people suffer from, and alongside other forms of like mental health issues that you might run into when you get to grad school. Okay, but I think I'll leave it at that because we've been going for a long time and we've had enough negativity from me.
Yeah,
okay.
I'll just say really quickly, academic life is full of rejection, and you should know that too. Being a professor, your papers are rejected, your conference proposals are rejected, your grants are rejected, and you just have to deal with it. You have to deal with it in the way that you can. And if you feel like you can't do it, then it might not be for you. And it sucks. I'm not saying this is ideal, but we're kind of like just describing the reality so people know what they're getting into. So there's a little bad cop from me.
Okay. So the last slide, they pulled together some resources. Again, I'll put the link to these slides in the description of this video once the live stream's over. So if you want to go check out Liz's 12 tips for success in philosophy graduate school, then you can just click that link and go there. And the same for the others there as well. Okay. Before I announce the winner of the second winner for the book giveaway, did you all want to say anything else?
No, I think I'm good.
Yeah, I think I'm good too. I think that pretty much covered it. So
okay. If you all are okay with it, you want to do a little bit of Q&A, maybe like 10 minutes?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you've got a question for Liz or Justin, type the word question first and then write out the rest of it. While you're doing that, I am going to announce the second winner here. So again, 6 people signed up to become a patron well, I'm sorry, actually only 2 people signed up to become a patron, in addition to the ones I previously had, but only 6 submitted questions. And the winner for, let me scroll up. Yeah. The winner, the second one, is Ian Hell. Ian Hell. So thank you very much, Ian, for becoming a patron. And here was Ian's question. How could you unify God's all goodness and all power with the fact of natural evil concerning non-human animals in nature? So this will make a great interview on the problem of animal suffering. I thought it would be a good one too. I think I've only done one that touches on the topic, and I would like to do something more on it. Okay, so thank you very much, Brandon and Ian. Congratulations. And I'll make sure I thank you all at the end, but thank you, Justin and Liz, for spending so much time talking about this. Someone in the chat said, yeah, here it is. This should be encouraging. This is an amazing resource. Thank you so much.
Cool.
So I'm glad people are finding it helpful. And also thank you, Maverick Christian, for your super chat. He says, Liz, you'll be happy to know that I have no expectation of finding a philosophy faculty job after earning a graduate degree in philosophy.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I was especially warning people about this partially because I told my professor, I was like, oh yeah, I just want to go do philosophy for fun. And then, I'll do whatever afterwards. And as the longer I was in the program, the stronger my desire for a faculty job. It just got stronger and stronger and stronger. And I think I would have been pretty heartbroken by the end if I hadn't gotten a job. And, I probably would have gotten over it and it would have been fine. And, I don't know if I would have necessarily said I regretted going to grad school, but I definitely know people that did. And they said, what was I doing with my life? I can't believe, especially people that went to grad school, then bounced around with jobs for a few years and then ended up leaving and doing something else. I know some of them say, I really do regret going to grad school. And it's hard. Another thing we didn't mention is you can't really start saving for retirement until you're 30. And there are big financial implications of that. And it's a huge chunk of your time. And either you're trying to balance it with having a family or you're putting off having a family. And I know women, for example, that didn't have kids until after tenure, and it's fine, but it's just, there's trade-offs and choices you have to make, and it's not a small decision. So, yeah.
All right. Brian Nicholson asked, what about MOOCs? I'm not sure what that is.
Neither am I.
MOOCs. So, Brian, if you're still watching, can you...
Massive open online courses.
Huh. Okay.
So it's free online classes, I guess.
Okay. Are there valuable certificates or other forms of credentials we can get in philosophy to help grow as writers and thinkers and seem cooler at parties?
Seeming cooler at parties is the whole reason. If you want to go into a philosophy PhD program to seem cooler at parties, you should do it. Yeah, that's a good question. It is really difficult. I will say I've had people ask me about fully online certificates or online MA programs. And unfortunately, at least right now, there's just not a lot of good ones, or at least the ones that are there are just super, super expensive. And I think there's some scams out there too that you should be careful of, especially if you're paying for it. So I'm not saying there aren't any valuable certificates or credentials out there, but I really think they're probably pretty rare. And especially to get I think a lot of people that I know and that I've actually met through the YouTube community, they've taught themselves, they've self-taught a lot. And I think you can learn a ton through self-teaching. But I think that level of criticism and just putting your ideas under the fire, I think that's really hard to get outside of going to a PhD program. And I think that's also what's, I think, really important to get into publishing and, kind of doing these things that I guess are maybe marks of professional philosophy. So yeah. I don't have any, any, online certificates I would recommend off the top of my head, but I do think there's not a lot of good online options, and maybe that'll change. Maybe the pandemic will change that. I think it'd be cool to start an online MA thing at Ryerson, philosophy of religion or something, but yeah, I don't know. Go ahead, Justin.
So I agree. I'm also not aware of any online programs that would really be worth it. You can for the particular goals that you listed, I think that this is what maybe part of what Liz was saying. It seems like self-study can get you a decent way towards those goals, and there's not really much point in getting a low quality, credential from some online place, instead of just doing the self-study without worrying about the credential. And then, but ultimately there are those things that you can only get from like going to a legit philosophy program. So Liz mentioned the your ideas under fire kind of thing. That's much more extreme, and for people who actually know what they're talking about and not just amateurs on the internet. That makes a huge difference. The kind of under fire that we're talking about here. And another thing that I think is hard to get outside of an actual like legit philosophy program is you don't really have a sense of what the latest ideas and work are so much when you're outside of the academy. You get to hear a lot more of like the behind the scenes of like, oh, so-and-so's working on this cool new idea. And, here's the latest thoughts about this thing. Whereas, when you're outside of the academy, you don't really know that stuff is going on. And by the time it becomes like public, like out in journals and stuff, that's like a couple years later, but after people started talking about it. So there are some things that you just can't get elsewhere, but the self-study thing can get you some of the way towards the kind of goals that you mentioned here, like growing as a writer and a thinker and seeming cooler at parties.
Okay. BDS asked, can you submit a philosophy paper to a journal with no university affiliation?
Yeah. So I've wondered about this. You can, because I know some people who have done it, but I'm not sure if there are further restrictions and if you need like special permission from the editor. Do you know, Liz?
I don't think I think you can. I don't think you need special permission. I do think, so journals are most journals are blind reviewed. Almost all of the top ones are. But there's different kinds of blind review. So one kind of blind review is that the referees, which isn't the editor, it's separate people that the editor pulls in to read your paper, that they don't know who you are and you don't know who they are. That's the most common kind of blind review. That's called double blind review. It's pretty common. There's another kind of blind review that's called triple blind review, which means the editor themselves doesn't know who you are. And that's a lot less common. The only unfortunate thing about, I think, submitting without an affiliation is the editor will know you don't have an affiliation, and then hopefully they wouldn't count that against you, but there might be some bias there. But I think you can submit, and I'm not necessarily even saying that you shouldn't submit, although I would probably have a professional philosopher, maybe even several, like look at your paper and tell you that it's publishable, give you comments if they can before you just send it off to a journal. Because I do think, like we've been talking about, the standards that philosophers use there just might be things that you're just not aware of, or standards that like just ways that people write papers in philosophy that you might just have no idea. And then if you don't know about that, it might even be simple things like where to put the abstract or how to word certain things, or that you should have an outline of the sections, or, these things that almost all philosophy papers do. And if you don't know that, your paper will probably just get rejected right off the bat. And maybe you have a good idea and you just need to format it right or whatever. So that's to say, I would definitely have someone look at the paper. But yeah, I think you can submit without an affiliation, to answer your question.
I think so. A lot of journals now use online submission systems, and those have a place where you're supposed to like select your affiliation from a preset list. I think that some of them, and maybe all of them, but at least some of them do have like an option for independent scholar. But if there are any that don't, I'm not sure like what I would do in that situation. Like maybe you could email the editor and say, I'm an independent scholar. Do you take submissions from independent? Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, that was. I've
also seen people use like their undergrad affiliation or like whatever program they were at most recently. So you could maybe do that too. But yeah, you could also email the editor. But yeah, independent scholar would be what you would look for initially.
Yeah.
Okay, Catherine Crone asked, is there a way to gauge the kind of program I have a chance of getting in at. I want to apply to the highest ranked program without wasting my money applying to the ones I have no chance at.
I think you need a professional philosopher to look at your writing, probably would be the most. I mean, also having you in class and interacting with you would be another way that you could get feedback from someone. But I think having someone looking at your writing sample or just your philosophical writing would probably be the best way to gauge it. And just depending on your situation, if you are in a philosophy program, or if you're at a university but maybe not a philosophy major but really interested in philosophy and took a few philosophy classes, you could talk to the professors of those classes and sort of see what they think. And I'll also note too, it's not that difficult to get fee waivers. So I would actually be more worried about wasting my time than wasting my money, because I really think if I could do it again, I think I could do the whole process for pretty cheap, like given some of the tips we gave above. It's not free, of course. But yeah, I think the biggest thing would be just getting a professional philosopher to look at your writing. I don't know if that's what you also think, Justin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think also that if a professional philosopher, or ideally multiple professional philosophers who are all willing to write you letters, agree that, yeah, you are suited to like apply to decent philosophy grad school programs, then I think that you shouldn't pick all right, I'm only going to apply to up to like the 10th school in the ranking or something. You should apply to the top schools, even though you have like the smallest chance of getting in, and also some stuff in the middle. What I was advised to do was to kind of scatter my applications and range from like, okay, some of the top schools, some of the middle schools, some of the schools at the bottom where, it's very likely that you'll get accepted because they're extremely low ranked or not ranked, but it's like a safety net, I think was what they called it. Anyway, but yeah. I wouldn't, try to like draw a line of like, well, I am likely to get into only the schools in this range, right? Let the schools decide whether they're going to admit you. Don't exclude yourself from the schools that you can apply to. That's another way that somebody I knew they made that point in a slightly different context. They're like, don't say no to yourself. Let other people say no to you. This might be one of those situations.
This was like my biggest regret. I mean, it worked out fine and I went to Notre Dame and it was great, but I applied to almost all unranked schools because I think the professor I had been getting advice from was risk averse and just basically was like, if you're just going to do it for fun and then you don't worry about getting an academic job, like, just apply to low ranked schools and hopefully you'll at least get into a few of them. And I feel like I should have believed in myself more and just gone a little higher. I applied, like literally Notre Dame is like 16 or 17, I think. And then I think every other school I applied to was either like maybe like 45 and up or not ranked at all. And I really wish I would have just put myself out there. And I like the tiers thing. I think having schools in different tiers would have been good, but I went way too low. So don't do that.
Okay, looks like one, possibly two more questions. So this one, do you consider it justified for some academic Christian philosophers to refuse to deal with arguments from atheists who only move at the level of social media like YouTube?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, it seems to me like it's a completely voluntary, like, yeah, if they want to engage with those people, they can. If they don't want to, they don't have to. There are reasons to do it. There are also reasons not to do it. And it seems to me like there's no like obligation one way or another. I think it's good that some of them do choose to engage with those people. I also think it's good that some of them choose not to and focus more of their time on work that is going to be more valuable long-term in some ways than, responding to Facebook comments or something like that.
Let's do this question. It's hard. He's written several messages, so I'll try to summarize what he's saying. So Planning is Bulldog is the YouTuber's name. And he apparently has graduated from high school, but is not, due to life issues, not able to go to college. But he's self-taught, basically reading a lot of the literature. He wants to know, about publishing in a journal. And so you already kind of answered, you don't have to be affiliated with the university to publish in a journal. But you did recommend sending your writing off to a philosophy professor, having them look over it and give feedback. Now, in his case, I asked him, do you have philosophy professors? He said, no, I'm not at college. So what do you all think in that case? What are the chances if you just send someone an email and say, hey, can you take a look and give feedback? Is a philosophy professor going to respond to that? Or are they too busy grading all the other papers they have?
Yeah, see, a lot of them are probably not going to respond, because we get emails from random people, and there are people who'll be like, hey, I have this idea, I wrote this up, will you read this? And a lot of them, and maybe not all of them, but enough of them are just junk that it makes the most practical sense to just ignore this stuff. So that does make it a little bit tricky. I mean, I think maybe the way to proceed is you gotta have a philosopher that you know. And I mean, there are ways to try to get to know philosophers, I guess, given how, like some of us, like Liz and I, are active on social media to some extent. So that might be one place where, depending on, what, social media groups you hang out in, you might start to get to know certain philosophers. But I don't know. I mean, it is a tough situation to be in. What do you think, Liz?
Yeah, I unfortunately do get a lot of people sending me stuff. I try to at least reply and even say something short, or say, hey, check out this paper that I wrote or something. But it's hard, and I'm busy, and I unfortunately just don't have time. And I'll have people email me and say, let's set up a Zoom meeting, I want to talk to you. And it's like, I just can't. I'm sorry. Like, I wish I could, but I think you also have to realize, like, I'm under lots of pressure to be publishing right now to get tenure. This semester, I had over 200 students. I have service duties. I have advising duties. I am married. And like, there's just all like a lot of demands for my time. And I don't even have kids. I mean, the philosophers that have kids, I think it's even more so. So I think it's not that we don't like you or don't want to talk to you, but it is difficult. I did have someone the other day, and it's someone that I've met before, but he actually wanted feedback on something. And he sent me like a 400-word summary of the paper. And actually that was great. I could read it in like 10 minutes, and I gave him a few thoughts. I said, look at these papers. And for me, it wasn't, if it's like a sentence, it's like not enough detail for you to really give feedback. But if it's more than like 500 words, I think it's just going to be really time consuming. So maybe that's one thing you could try, is like sending a short little blurb. I also think people are more likely to respond if you're interacting with their work or responding to something they've written. So you could try emailing an author. Like if you're interested in omnipotence, you could try emailing someone who's given an argument in that literature that is maybe like similar to yours or whatever. But it is hard. So I will acknowledge, I think we're in a tough situation if we're getting lots of emails and we don't have time to reply to all of them. But I also know that, getting feedback on your work can be difficult too. And if you can, even taking a class or two or auditing a class or two at a local school. If someone said, hey, can I audit your class? I would be like, yeah, sure. So that might be a way to kind of get to know them. But once COVID's over, it might be a little bit easier as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, the point about interacting with their work is a good one, because that's definitely true. People are more likely to respond and interact if you're like saying, hey, I have a question about your paper that you published, or I've written a response to your paper that you published. Yeah. That'll increase your chances of the person being willing to interact with you.
I did hear Dr. Craig say that the easiest type of paper to get published is a response to a paper that's already been published in a journal.
Yep, that's true.
So maybe planning as Bulldog, you might want to try that. If you've got a response to a paper, contact that philosopher, ask questions about their paper, and maybe introduce your response somehow in a summary form, get their feedback, and go from there.
That was actually something that came up in the previous video we did, where we were talking about how to do philosophical research as well.
Go check that video out.
Yes. If you loved this discussion, you're in luck, because we did another discussion prior to this on how to do philosophical research. So you should go check that out right after this video. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Justin and Liz, for joining me. This was really helpful.
Yep. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
If you value the work that I do on this channel, please consider becoming a patron. Like I said, it will allow me to devote more of my time and attention to creating content like my animated videos. I'm so eager to get back to them, but they just take so much time, and I'd love to invest some time here. Okay, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you later.